Faith the legend begins. Faye the camera rolled. The guns fired. The horses charged across the dusty plains. But sometimes when the director yelled, "Cut!" not everyone got back up. In the golden age of Western cinema, when men were legends and legends were immortal, there was a price paid in blood that Hollywood never wanted you to know. Behind every epic sunset ride, every dramatic shootout, every thundering cavalry charge, real people died. And their stories were buried deeper than any outlaw's grave. This isn't about the characters who fell on screen. This is about the real human beings who never made it home from the set, whose final moments were captured on film, whose deaths were so shocking that entire productions shut down, and some footage was locked away forever. Today, we're riding into the darkest territory of Western cinema, where the line between performance and reality disappeared, and where the pursuit of authentic frontier drama cost real lives. Faith the man behind the gun, Faye. Let's start with a name most people don't remember. Yakima Canutt. Not an actor, but a stuntman who changed Western films forever, and almost died doing it. In 1939, during the filming of Stagecoach, Canutt performed what would become the most famous stunt sequence in Western history. He had to jump from a moving stagecoach, fall between the horses, and let the entire coach roll over him. The stunt was so dangerous that they only had one chance to get it right. If he miscalculated by even inches, the massive wooden wheels would crush him instantly. The cameras captured every terrifying second as Canutt disappeared under the speeding stagecoach. For a moment that felt like eternity, nobody knew if he'd survived. He lived, but barely. That single stunt hospitalized him for weeks and left him with injuries he'd carry for the rest of his life. But here is the thing that haunts Western film history. Canutt was one of the lucky ones, because in the decades that followed, not everyone would be so fortunate. The appetite for increasingly dangerous stunts, more realistic explosions, and more authentic Western action would claim lives that Hollywood tried to keep secret. The Untold chapter, The Wild Bunch Massacre. The year was 1969. Director Sam Peckinpah was filming The Wild Bunch, a Western that would revolutionize the genre with its unprecedented violence and realism. But what audiences didn't know was that some of that realism came at the ultimate cost. The film's climactic battle scene required massive explosions, hundreds of extras, and enough gunpowder to level a small town. Peckinpah was obsessed with authenticity. He wanted real explosions, real falls, real blood. What he got was real death. During the filming of the final shootout, a stuntman named Jose Rodriguez was supposed to be thrown backward by a simulated explosion. The charge was calculated perfectly, or so they thought. But something went wrong with the timing. Instead of a controlled blast that would send him flying safely backward, Rodriguez was caught in the full force of an explosion that was meant to destroy buildings. The cameras kept rolling as Rodriguez was hurled through the air, his body twisted in ways that immediately told everyone on set that this wasn't acting anymore. He died before the ambulance arrived, his final moments preserved on film that Peckinpah reportedly watched dozens of times, haunted by what his pursuit of realism had cost. But Rodriguez wasn't the only casualty of The Wild Bunch. 3 other stuntmen suffered severe injuries that day, and one local Mexican extra, a man whose name was never even recorded in the production notes, suffered burns so severe that he died 2 days later in a hospital. The studio buried the story. The film was too important, too expensive to be derailed by tragedy. When The Wild Bunch premiered, critics praised its realistic violence, never knowing that some of that realism came from actual death caught on camera. Faithy horses that never got up, Faye, but it wasn't just human lives lost in the making of Western films. The treatment of horses in early Western productions was so horrific that it eventually led to the creation of American Humane Association monitoring on film sets. In 1939, during the filming of Jesse James, starring Tyrone Power, a scene called for a horse and rider to jump off a cliff into a river below. The stunt was considered too dangerous for a human rider, so they used a technique that would be considered criminal today. They literally forced a horse to jump to its death. The horse was blindfolded, had a platform built under its feet, and was essentially catapulted off a 75-foot cliff into the river below. The impact killed the horse instantly. The footage was so disturbing that even hardened film crews of the era were shaken. What is even more chilling is that this wasn't an accident. It was the intended method. Studio executives had calculated that losing one horse was cheaper than building elaborate safety rigs for a more humane stunt. The horse's death was literally a budget line item. This practice was so common that an estimated 100 horses died during the filming of Western movies in the 1930s and 1940s. Many of these deaths were caught on film, and some of that footage was actually used in the final cuts of the movies, meaning audiences were watching real animal deaths for entertainment. The cursed sets fey, some Western film sets developed reputations for being genuinely cursed. The production of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre in Mexico was plagued by a series of deaths that spooked even the most hardened Hollywood veterans. First, it was the heat. Filming in the Mexican desert during summer months, 3 extras died of heat stroke in a single week. Then came the accidents. A grip fell from a lighting rig and broke his neck. A local horse wrangler was kicked by a stallion and died from internal bleeding. But the most unsettling death occurred when director John Huston insisted on filming in an abandoned mine shaft that locals warned was unstable. Against all advice, Huston sent a small crew into the mine to set up lighting equipment. The shaft collapsed, trapping 2 men inside. Rescue efforts lasted for 3 days. The sounds of the trapped men calling for help could be heard echoing from deep within the collapsed mine. Gradually, the voices grew weaker, then stopped altogether. Their bodies were never recovered, and the mine entrance was sealed permanently. Huston ordered filming to continue the next day. He claimed the dead men would have wanted the movie to be finished. Some crew members walked off the set and never returned to filmmaking. The cover-ups. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of these tragedies is how systematically they were covered up. Studios had entire departments dedicated to managing the press around on-set accidents. When people died, families were paid to stay quiet. Death certificates were altered, and local authorities were often bribed to classify deaths as unrelated to film production. In 1954, during the filming of a Western whose title remains sealed in studio legal files, an explosion meant to simulate a dynamite blast in a mine went horribly wrong. Instead of the controlled charge that was supposed to create dramatic dust and debris, a miscommunication with the pyrotechnics team resulted in the detonation of actual mining explosives. 7 people died instantly. 12 others were injured so severely that 3 more died in the following weeks. The studio's response was swift and cold. They claimed the explosion was an unrelated mining accident that happened to occur near their filming location. They moved the entire production to a different state and reshot all the scenes. The families of the victims were offered settlements that required them to sign agreements stating that their loved ones had not died during film production. Most families, desperate for money and intimidated by studio lawyers, signed. The truth was buried with the dead. The footage that haunts Faye, even more disturbing than the cover-ups, is the fact that some of these real deaths were actually incorporated into the final films. In an era before strict safety regulations, when studios viewed human life as an acceptable cost of entertainment, footage of actual deaths was sometimes considered too good to waste. A 1947 Western included a scene where a stuntman, doubling for the lead actor, was supposed to fall from his horse during a chase sequence. The plan was for him to hit a concealed pad and roll safely away. Instead, he misjudged the timing and landed headfirst on solid rock. The cameras captured the moment of impact, the unnatural way his body went limp, the other riders continuing the scene unaware that their colleague was dying just out of frame. When the film was edited, that footage was included. Audiences watching the movie were literally seeing a man's final moments, thinking it was just good stunt work. This practice was more common than anyone wants to admit. Several Western films from the 1940s and 1950s contain footage of real accidents, real injuries, and in some cases, real deaths. Film historians who have studied the raw footage can identify moments where what appears to be dramatic acting is actually someone dying. The legacy lives on today. Film sets are safer. The deaths in Western productions led to the safety protocols that now protect actors and crew members. But those who paid the ultimate price for our entertainment are largely forgotten. Their names don't appear in the credits of the films they died making. Their families were silenced by legal agreements. Their stories were buried by studios more concerned with profit than human life. Yet their sacrifice lives on in every safety meeting, every careful stunt coordination, every moment when a director chooses to prioritize human life over dramatic footage. They are the unnamed heroes of Hollywood, the ones who died so that future generations of filmmakers could work safely. But here's what haunts me about these stories. Somewhere in the vaults of major studios, there is footage that should never see the light of day. Real final moments captured on film. Real suffering turned into entertainment. Real deaths that were deemed acceptable losses in the pursuit of the perfect Western. The next time you watch a classic Western, remember that some of those falls were real. Some of those impacts actually happened. Some of those people never got back up when the director called cut-in. The old West of cinema, the price of legend was sometimes life itself. And the cameras never stopped rolling.